up on this week's show, the retro light gun powered by AI.
A creepy 8-bit style platformer arrives just in time for Halloween.
And we go inside the world of System 3 and The Last Ninja with Mark Cale.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you every Friday with our amazing friends at Bitmap Books. Now, one of my favourite books that they've ever done is Commodore Amiga, a visual compendium. Now, for your regular listener, you know much we love the Amiga. Starting in the early days like Defender of the Crown, Barbarian, Hybris, lots more as well. Marble Madness, those early titles, and of course going into the titles that made the Amiga famous. Populous, Cannon Fodder, Speedball, Worms. They're all in there covering more than 140 games in over 420 pages. We'll tell you more about this soon, but if you love the Amiga, check it out. Commodore Amiga, a visual compendium, and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 449, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And great to have you joining us for the podcast that every single Friday takes you on a bit of an adventure back through time to the golden age of video games, and of course brings you up to speed on what's been happening in the wonderful world of retro gaming and technology from over the last 7 days. Because that's the way this podcast works, isn't it? I was chatting to one of my mates about the podcast the other day, and I said it's really like two podcasts rolled into one.
I remember when we did that survey and we
yes.
do you like the interviews or do you like the news? And it was a 50-50 split, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, we did like a listener survey, like, should we reduce the news bit and extend the interview? How should it work? Turns out people love both parts of the show, so we'll keep it as it is. That's what we do first half of the podcast. That's when we bring you up to speed on what's been happening in retro from over the last week. And the second half of the show is when we welcome on industry veterans to tell us their story. And I'm particularly excited about this week's guest, having enjoyed games like Putty on my Amiga, and do you remember the game Myth as well by System 3?
I remember Myth, yeah. Amazing graphics on Myth.
I remember getting that on an Amiga format cover disc. When I first got my Amiga 500 Plus, I got it for Christmas 91, and then the only games I had for it were like the pack-in games, so like, you know, Captain Planet, Lemmings, Bot versus the Space Mutants, for about 2 or 3 months, really. Played those games to death. And then walking into WH Smith with my dad and spotting, actually, they do magazines about the Amiga, seeing Amiga format issue 33 on the shelf, and it had Myth on the cover disc. So I absolutely rinsed that cover disc. I must have played it got hundreds of hours.
I absolutely love System 3. Like, they had that whole ninja theme as well. With, of course, Last Ninja 2, which was great, but also Putty and Putty Squad, of course. We had Galahad on our guest, and we mentioned how he actually helped Putty Squad get released all those years later on, which is fantastic. And this is because we're talking to Mark Cale, and Mark Cale basically founded System 3, and it's an absolutely awesome company. And I remember playing System 3 games even into the PC period. I was playing Constructor. I was absolutely obsessed with Constructor. Love that title. Yeah,
we chat to Mark, and at the beginning of the interview, we try and find out whether System 3 are actually the longest running independent British software house and publisher, because they started in 1982, and he couldn't think of any that have been going that long that are still going today. So that's a long time, isn't it?
And they've just done Constructor Plus came out in 2019. So, and there's also something that's coming out at the moment as well, which is pretty modern and pretty exciting as well for fans of The Last Ninja.
Yeah, now he's doing a Kickstarter that's got just a few days left. There's 5 days left on it when this podcast comes out. Absolutely smashed its goal. He wanted £10,000. It's over 113 grand at the time of recording. It's a heavily in demand, and this is for the Last Ninja Collection and bonus games, basically bringing Last Ninja 1, 2, and 3, International Karate, IK Plus, Bangkok Nights as well. And this was funded in 37 minutes. So basically it's a collection of these games and some bonus games as well for modern systems, PS5, PS4, Switch and PC.
Yeah, and also some extra info about Last Ninja 4 as well and what went on there. We talk about that in the interview as well. Some really interesting stuff and behind the scenes stuff that's kind of going on. And the whole story of, that kind of British success of taking over other titles from other countries and then kind of adapting them and then having your own original titles as well, and porting for so many systems as well, because these weren't just available for the Amiga. They were on the Amstrad as well, Atari ST, C64. There was some titles going on to like Putty, which was going on to the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy Advance titles. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, and just hearing how he's maintained that longevity, going over 42 years and surviving as a indie software house in the UK. Just an incredible story, dating back to, like you said, those early kind of Commodore 64 and Atari 400 days as well, right up to the modern day, and hearing about this amazing new Kickstarter that you have still got time to back, so I'll link that in the show notes as well. Our special guest, System 3 founder and CEO Mark Cale, will be coming up on the show in around half an hour from now. So that means first half of the podcast, that's when we have a little look about, what's been happening in retro from over the last week. We're always keeping our little beady eyes on the socials, aren't we, throughout the week, and bookmarking any stories of interest, and also checking our Discord as well, because if you see anything you think might be interesting for the podcast, we have a little channel in our Discord. We'd appreciate just little links in there. We always appreciate the stories, some user-submitted ones. And this one looks right up your street, Joe, being our resident light gun fan. I mean, whenever, we talk about going to arcades and stuff, normally got to drag you kicking and screaming off Time Crisis to let someone else have a go. If you ever go to like Play Expo and there's a queue of like 40 people behind an arcade, usually Joe hogging Time Crisis.
You know what? I just want to say, I'm pretty like chill about that. Like, if I feel there's a queue behind me, I'm very British and I'll be like, oh, my time's up. But you know what? You're not wrong. I will just join the back of the queue and have another go about half an hour later.
We're not seeing Joe for 4 hours. Where is he? Oh, he's in the queue.
Yeah, Time Crisis or House of the Dead all the way.
Point Blank. I always find Point Blank's massively popular at those shows.
Yeah, Point Blank as well, man. Well, the reason we're talking about this and taking the mickey out of me is because Time Crisis may be in our front rooms again. So famously, the old kind of G-Con, light guns for the old PlayStation, PS2, etc., don't unfortunately work on modern TVs. They're designed to work on CRT TVs, as I'm sure many listeners know. And we have had a few alternatives, like alternative guns for over the last couple of years. The Sinden light gun that we've spoken about many times on the show. Ravi is a fan of that as well. But there's a new one coming out, which is going to be powered by AI, which sounds really interesting. And they're saying this is the world's first AI-powered plug-and-play gun for modern TVs, which I'll get onto a little bit more in a moment. But interestingly, it looks as though it's officially licensed to Time Crisis. It's called the Gamey. The Gamey, I think it's called.
I just thought it'd be pronounced Game. It's basically Gaime. I think it might just be Game, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll go for Game. And it is obviously a
I get it, because you aim a gun, don't you? Game.
There we go. Took us a minute of saying it out loud, but we got there. And it does look really interesting, but it's all looks like it's officially endorsed and branded by Time Crisis, at least, which was a Namco game. Don't see anything about Namco on the actual unit itself anywhere, but it looks like a little black box, about the size of a beer mat, maybe. Not very tall at all, that you plug into your TV, and then the light gun will just work on the TV, but it apparently uses AI to kind of like, I want to say track with your TV.
Doesn't like everything use? I saw toaster listed on Amazon that is powered by AI.
Well, I think this is an interesting use of the technology. So before, the old light gun technology only worked with CRTs. And then you had something like, I think it was called the aim track. I've played with these ones, but I've never actually used them like long term or owned one myself. But that was using the kind of Wii technology, which didn't work amazingly well. And then the Sinden light gun came along, which allowed people to play it on a modern monitor, and that used image recognition. So it had some kind of level of intelligence there. And that's meant to be really accurate and really good. Weren't they on the 1UP arcades as well? And they had a deal with them. Now, I guess this one with AI probably does something similar, but a bit smarter. And I'm wondering, obviously you just point it at the the monitor and it detects what's going on, how well it's going to work with certain games. And also, will there be any like kind of advantage that you can have? So maybe you could go into an easy mode and the AI helps you out a bit, or increases the kind of target space,
just
around.
shooting up at the ceiling, just killing everybody on the screen for you. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work. If it's obviously the Switch controllers, don't use AI, but I wasn't impressed with them. I played the House of the Dead remake tried to play that with the Switch Joy-Con.
It felt too smooth, didn't it? Kind of.
It just didn't feel right. It
uses accelerometers, doesn't it, to see how you're tilting it? Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that at all, and just found myself playing it in like controller mode, like with the analog sticks. I'm hoping this is better. Like I say, interestingly, seems to be licensed with Time Crisis. It is a port of the actual arcade game. It's not a port of the PlayStation game. Which is interesting because the PlayStation game, obviously had like different modes in it and, different difficulties and stuff like that. So it will just be the arcade game. But what's also really interesting is there is 2 versions you can buy. So there's the $90 base version, which would just come with the bright orange light gun, which looks kind of similar to the original PS1 G-Con, an A and B button on the side there, and that's about it by the looks of things. But then there's a $120 option, which does include a pedal, which obviously Time Crisis,
for reloading,
for reloading, hiding behind the boxes, hiding behind barrels and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So obviously, I guess with just the normal gun, it'd be like the PS1 version where you just use the button on the side. So what kind of came to my mind, AI aside and licensing and all that to one side, is this is a much more affordable, modern, legit way to play Time Crisis than the arcade one-ups.
I think on it says basically it's on the promotion. It says it works from various angles and distances, supports all kind of common screen sizes, and can be tilted to shoot. And then afterwards, it says it is designed with the casual gamer in mind. And I think that's what they're aiming for, something a bit cheaper that's designed for the casual gamer, maybe not the pro or the expert that's really going to be into accuracy. Who knows? Maybe they can update the AI, make it a bit smarter, make the gun more accurate over time.
One thing that worries me is it boasts on the poster low input lag. So I'm like, the fact that it points it out, is that like, am I overthinking this? Like they're aware there's a bit of input lag? Or
maybe there has been another solution, so they kind of want to alleviate those fears, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, they are just showing this off at the moment because the Tokyo Gaming Show is on right now. So they've been demoing that this week. So no reviews or anything else so far on it. I think the AI thing, absolute nonsense. Everything's got that kind of powered by AI at the moment, which I think if you're going for a retro product, you don't need that buzzword and that hype on there. I don't think it really adds anything to a Time Crisis light gun. But yeah, I mean, some people have been saying, can we load other games onto this? Because it doesn't seem like it. This is literally, it's a Time Crisis console, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the guns. I mean, I'm sure there will be people who will find workarounds. I'm sure if one of these landed in Ravi's lap, there would be a House of the Dead running on there within a week. But yeah, I think for people that are big fans of that game and want the kind of arcade experience at home, this does look like a really nice solution, I think, in terms of pricing as well. No word on whether we're getting a UK release at the moment. Obviously, they're demoing this in Japan at the moment, but they're saying in terms of US pricing, the base edition, $89.99 and $119.99 for the deluxe version with the pedal and some bonus items included too, which I think, I imagine this will be a lot of fun, like playing it around your house, Joe, like, at a Christmas party or something.
Yeah, I think the main selling point for me is it's more affordable. I mean, even if there isn't a UK release, I'm sure we'll be able to get it on Amazon or something, like many other of these retro things that haven't come out over here. I mean, $90 still seems a little bit steep for just one game. I wish they would just kind of, I mean, people, like you say, people will get round it and stuff like that, but it would have been good if they released it with a few games on there. Like Namco was Point Blank as well, so that would have been great. Time Crisis and Point Blank 1 and 2, or Time Crisis 1 and 2 on there would have been really cool. Just the one game feels a little, I don't know, we'll see. Unless they've got big plans to release different variants, because of, I mean, it looks cool on the little black box how it has got the Time Crisis logo on there, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I wish there was a little bit more, personally.
Some people have been saying, if you want that arcade experience as well, no word of recoil, which obviously was a big part of the arcade experience, which might take you out of it a little bit. So I don't think I've ever played like a home light gun system that has recoil. Seems to be something that's still like limited to the arcade.
I had a friend who had one, and I'm fairly sure it was battery powered, and it used to die like straight away.
Right.
Yeah,
really loud as well, isn't it? Like
yeah,
clack, 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 clack.
yeah.
So-
And it would just die like within like a few games, and I think it used to jam a lot if I remember rightly. So yeah, I don't think they
Not all like common though, is it?
Yeah, they don't think they ever executed that at home very well.
Yeah. But being a Time Crisis fan, Joe, is this something you think you'd want?
I want it, but I just, like I say, for $90, I just want more.
Yeah.
I don't want one game. I want, 4 or 5 games, which I know is difficult with licensing and stuff like that, but I'm sure they could have done it.
Let me just delete that off your Christmas list.
Oh. Well, if you're getting me for free.
So if you're going to keep an eye on that story, we'll post a link in this week's show notes. Now, of course, we are into our favourite month, Joe. You and I love this month. Sorry, don't know where that came from. It's obviously Halloween in a couple of weeks' time. Ravi, you're not a fan. I know. This is where Ravi tunes out. Yeah.
I tune out. But also, to be honest, this story, it's about the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I've never actually seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I know people are going to be shocked. But,
I haven't seen the movie. I've got really bad memories of being on holiday in Mallorca as a kid, and kind of the holiday reps up on stage doing a really crap cabaret version of it.
I've always got drunk to the time warp at a rock gig when they put the time warp on at Rock City or something like that.
What Dan just said there, I thought I was the only person that ever happened.
All right, so it wasn't just me. Yeah,
we went to Rhodes when I was about 6 years old, and going off on a right tangent here, but I was about 6 years old, and we did the. Me and my friend were in the Sooty and Sweep Children's Club, as you are when you're that age and you go on holiday with your parents. And we had to learn a live theatre production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, starring all the children of us all.
And you're take me back to school. I'd rather be there than here.
Yeah, and I just remember being on stage singing the Time Warp with us all wearing bin bags. With white face paint on, and I must have been about 6 years old on holiday.
I bet they charge loads for that holiday club as well and cheaped out on bin bags.
Well, we can relive those horrible memories, Joe, via a retro-style platformer that is coming out this month.
Yeah, so this is the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or the game is going to be called the Rocky Horror Show, and it's going to be a DuckTales / Castlevania NES style platformer, which obviously is right up my street. And I was watching the trailer to this, and it comes out just in time for Halloween. It is coming out in October, and I was like, this looks like the AVGN game they did a couple of years ago, which interestingly I actually played through about 6 months ago, because I just wanted to play like a retro style modern game, because I am a sucker for them. And it was on offer, so I bought it, number 1 and 2, the pack, the AVGN pack. And I really enjoyed it. The second one in particular, I really enjoyed. It's kind of like a Mega Man style game, kind of Mega Man meets Super Mario World. And I'm watching this trailer and I'm like, this seems really similar. It's got banging music, chiptune versions of, the famous songs. There we go.
You can talk over it, Joe.
And, yeah, I'm like, this looks really, really good, but really familiar. But yeah, it's the same developers, which are Freak Zone Games, and also Metal X Entertainment, who are a subsidiary of BitBot Media. So they're the people who were behind the AVGN game, which I do really recommend. I'm not just saying that because I'm a big fan of AVGN, but I really do like the look of this. The style of it, the colours of it, the gameplay of it, etc. Obviously, it always really captures that old kind of like Nintendo kind of feel, even though it's always a lot better than what Nintendo actually was graphically.
This is a kind of console-y one, because I think there was one released for the C64 like in 1985 back in the days.
Oh, there you go. This is obviously for modern consoles. It's going to be on Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, Steam, etc. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm definitely going to pick it up. Like I say, sounds like I'm selling the AVGN games, but if they're as good as that, I'm up for this any old day. And obviously a really famous IP, which, you know, Dan hasn't seen the film. Or was it Ravi who said he's not seen the film? Sorry.
I've not seen the film either, but I've got no desire to after those horrible memories of holidays as a kid. Yeah,
Dan, we need to dress up and watch it together.
We'll go to the theatre show next time it's coming round.
Yeah. I see people dress up in town and stuff.
Yeah,
and
no,
they'll proper go for it. Yeah.
I love you mentioned you were wearing a bin bag though, Joe. That was like everyone's Halloween costume back in the day, bin bag, wasn't it? You know, back in the 80s here in Britain. That's tough times. So yeah, it looks really fun. I mean, you know, you and I always around this time of year looking for kind of creepy games to play for the spooky season. So this could be a good one. No release date as yet. It just says this month. I've been looking on. Yeah, I've just checked Steam. No listing as yet on there from what I can see. But coming out on all the platforms, I imagine in time for the end of October. Should be any day now. So if you want to check out the trailer, I will link that in this week's show notes as well. Now, we do love talking about these kind of weird homebrew mods of classic systems and people kind of expanding them way beyond anything we ever dreamed of back in the day. And someone has made, I love this article on Retro Dodo, where they're talking about this Game Boy Advance SP prototype that basically turns it into a transformer.
This looks pretty cool. This is from the same guy that bought you know, that little PlayStation that was on the it was like a roulette wheel controller, and he had a square kind of image in there, and then he turned that into the screen, so it was like this really weird little controller that they had for, I think it was the Game of Life. So he's used to doing these strange mods, and this is a Game Boy Advance SP. I've never used an SP, but am I right, Joe, that he's flipped the screen around on this one, or does it kind of bend like that?
It doesn't bend like that, no. So it looks like if you were to open the Game Boy SP like this, like a clamshell, if you opened it up, but then broke it and got the bottom
bent
half
it right back,
and broke it all the way back, so it made it into like a cube kind of shape,
like kind of force bent it back.
Like bending your knees the wrong way.
Yeah, that's it. That is absolutely. Or if you opened a lunchbox, if you will, like, you know, the old-fashioned kind of like lunchboxes back in the day you take to school, and you opened it the whole way round, and then, you know, made them back to back. That's kind of like what it looks like. I'm assuming that's not what he did. I'm assuming he took it apart and then
snap it.
Yeah, just snap it and
just force your Game Boy like this.
Well, the reason he's done that is because usually the bottom half of the Game Boy Advance SP has got the controls on there, hasn't it? But for the mod that this guy's done, Hario Satoa, his name is, you don't actually need the built-in controller.
Yeah, because it's kind of bent backwards. I think he's covered up the controllers, but on the hinge, he's created this kind of interface, and it looks a bit flimsy to me, but it looks like it still works as well. So the controller has at the very top of it each individual different controller. So you've got a SNES one. You know, you can have many different types. You might even be able to get a Mega Drive one in there. He's got these, like, I think it's USB-C, two of them.
Like two of them, yeah, like dual ports. Out.
And I'm thinking one may be for the data or one might be for the power. I'm not sure how much power these controllers require, but maybe he's got two just for stability. But it basically clips in at the bottom. So you have these little custom controllers, and it means you can swap out controllers and use it as a little screen. But interestingly as well, it's got the camera working. So, you know, carts work in there as well. And it still seems to be fully kind of functional.
Yeah, so all he's done really is, like you said, bend it back the wrong way. And then where the hinge is, he's put a couple of USB ports on there, kind of tap those into the data cables, I guess, of, you know, where the lines would go into the controller of the Game Boy Advance SP normally, and modded a couple of Super Nintendo and Famicom controllers to have USB. It kind of jacks into there and takes over the control functions. You did say it looks a bit flimsy, and I agree, because basically what you're doing is you're hanging the Game Boy Advance basically off these dual USB ports, aren't you? It just kind of rests on top of the controller, and it's only using the USB ports for stability and making sure it doesn't fall off, which could be a reason there's two, Ravi. I think you might be right.
There's two on the Super Famicom, but there's one on the other controller.
Right.
So I'm not sure why they're requiring to. And in the video, he's got a picture of him holding a Wiimote as well and trying to stick it on at the end. So maybe there's plans for future ones. I think maybe if it had a little hinge at the back or something, or some way of clipping on something for support, like a bit of a surround, that might be quite cool. But I do like the idea of reusing it. You could probably do it with a Raspberry Pi screen and stuff. But if you're a total Game Boy Advance head, then this is original hardware, isn't it?
Because I have ripped USB ports off things by, kind of hanging cables that are too heavy. I've got like a Plip box that I used on my Amiga 3000, and I had USB power on that, and that just kind of hung down off the back of my desk.
Yeah, I can destroy USB-C ports as well.
Yeah, it's ripped the solder off, because there's too much weight on it after a while. So it looks like, that could be something, for future versions of this, a bit of extra support. A few people have commented that on the Instagram post as well. But yeah, nice idea, because that is one thing when you're playing, these kind of smaller handhelds, which, if we're honest, were probably designed for kids' hands back in the day. But when we're using them 20 years on, they can feel a little bit cramped. So being able to use like a full-size controller on something like a Game Boy, I think is, for us, I don't know about you guys, but my fingers are definitely a little bit more sausage-like than they were 20 years ago. So this would be definitely appreciated. So cool little mod, though. We always like keeping an eye on these little mods that people are doing out there in the retro community. So if you want to check that Instagram video, I'll shove that in our show notes as well. Now, we have got another great 16-bit style game to talk about, a Mega Drive game, actually, that looks awesome in just a minute, and retro piracy ring that has been smashed in Italy. Feels like it's the 90s all over again. More on that coming up in just a minute. Before we do that, let's just take a quick moment to welcome in a couple of new patrons to the podcast as well. We did have a brilliant patrons hangout on Sunday evening just gone. This is what we do every month for our patrons. Normally last Sunday of the month, we send out like a Zoom link out, Google Meets it is. Many patrons that want to join us can, we come on 2 hours on a Sunday evening, we'll have a couple of drinks, just basically chew the fat about anything and everything. And actually, it was quite funny because we covered so much on this week's hangout. I remember saying, when we do the teaser, what kind of things we talked about, it was just so random this week's hangout. It's like, how many different things did we cover in like 2 hours?
Oh, God, there's absolutely loads. We always start talking about games, and then it always just goes off on a tangent. Sometimes it moves to something relatable, films, or random motherboards, or even karaoke machines. We end up on quite often for some reason.
We're talking about CD TVs and controllers.
Old cell phones.
Old cell phones, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that I'm an IT manager, which makes absolutely no sense.
Jen from the IT crowd, that's our Ravi.
Yep.
That's our Joe, rather. It's always a bit of a giggle. So if you'd like to join us for that, all patrons are welcome. There will be another one coming up at the end of this month as well. We also do a bonus podcast for our gold members and above, which actually we're going to be doing Dreadful Controllers.
Well, our favourite controllers and dreadful controllers.
I've got some, I've got some good ones that I'm going to drop in there, definitely.
The best and the worst.
Tortured us as children.
Yeah, so we've got over 45 episodes of that. If you join us on Patreon as a gold member above, you unlock them all. So plenty of listening there as well. But really the main reason that, we ask for your support is just to make sure we can keep the lights on. We're coming up to our 9th anniversary of this podcast in January, which is crazy,
isn't it?
As much as we love the birthday, it's also when, web hosting, audio hosting, all of those very expensive bills have several zeros on the end come out in January. So any support that we get on Patreon, that all goes back into the running of the podcast. So we really appreciate that. And of course, we welcome new patrons into the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, and that is the Retro Hour Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame!
And let's welcome in our latest members. A massive thank you to Mike Inme
and Dave Campbell,
who both joined us on Patreon over the last week or so. We really appreciate your support. And if you'd like to sign up, all the details are at theretrohour.com. Now, we did talk about a cool 8-bit style game in the Rocky Horror game a couple of moments ago. But if you're more of a 16-bit fan, this one looks loads of fun. I imagine this one is probably quite up your street, Joe. You're a big fan of Zombies Ate My Neighbours.
Yeah, this looks really cool. So this is Lethal Wedding. Not Lethal Weapon, Lethal Wedding, which is going to be coming to the Mega Drive / Genesis from our friends over in Mega Cat Studios, who are just putting game out after game at the moment. And it's such, you mentioned at the start of the show, how we have two sides of the show. And it was actually my sister's wedding last weekend. And, time to see the cousins and aunts and uncles and everything. And, you know, they always ask about the podcast, and they always, how do you get a news section? You know, how is there news about the Sega Mega Drive? I was talking to my cousin, who's a little bit older than me. And, you know, he's like, how is it? And I'm like, trust me, have a listen. Every week almost, there is a new Mega Drive game out or a new...
Yeah, my brother didn't believe it either.
Yeah.
Like, no,
we had them on episode 97. So, you know, and they've created so much since then, which was, years ago, 2017.
Yeah, strength to strength. So this is going to be Lethal Wedding, which launches on Kickstarter on November 4th, 2024, which is very akin to, like you say, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Graphically, it actually reminded me of Chaos Engine a little bit.
Yeah, I can see where you're going.
A little bit. Or if anybody's played it, the True Lies game, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, the game of that, the licensed game for the Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo.
It's a very zoomed-in version of Chaos Engine.
Yeah, very zoomed-in version of Chaos Engine. A little bit more zoomed in than Zombies Ate My Neighbors as well. But in terms of gameplay, weapons and funny enemies and stuff like that, probably more along the lines of Zombies Ate My Neighbors. It looks like a really smooth, colourful, bright game. Graphically, you know, pretty much the same as those games that I've just described. I really like the look of it. In the game footage, no sign of two-player co-op, but it does say it's going to be a two-player co-op game, so maybe they haven't integrated that in there yet or anything like that. But it's going to be multiple weapons, which we can see from the trailer. It says it's going to be like weapons which are related to like a wedding. So I thought, okay, like they're going to be throwing like cutlery and dishes and cakes and stuff.
I don't know about you, Joe. I didn't have any weapons at my wedding from what I remember.
I know what it meant, like as in like, you know, I assumed, it means like you throw wedding cakes and stuff. But from what I can see, which I have no complaints about, the weapons are all like double barrel shotguns and
I think
rifles.
The cool thing about this is it kind of flips the video game idea on its head. You know, usually it's like save the princess or your wife has been stolen or your bride. This one's like the bride hunting down a cartel.
A bride on the warpath
to get her husband back, which is pretty cool. That it's kind of flipped, and she's got some brutal weapons as well. Actually, quite a big arsenal.
I love the music as well in the trailer, and I'll play a little bit of it here. It kind of reminds me of, you remember Psycho Santa on the Amiga, which has kind of got that really like soft, like Christmas music. Then the baby screams and it goes into like thrash metal. Listen to the intro of this.
It's got
a Mega Drive Genesis, you know, the Yamaha chip of the Mega Drive being used to full effect here.
It's got two-player co-op mode as well, which I think would be really good fun.
Yeah, like you said, Joe mentioned that a moment ago, but that kind of reminds me again of Chaos Engine, having the two-player mode on there, which I think would be loads of fun. So, it looks like a proper over-the-top kind of game, doesn't it? You know, like you said, in the vein of those kind of action flicks of the 80s, you know, which I imagine Lethal Wedding is a play on, you know, Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
So it looks loads of fun, actually. And you're mowing down enemies like psycho circus performers and clowns and stuff as well. So definitely a very over-the-top game. So if you want to back that on Kickstarter, launches in a few weeks' time. I'll shove that in the show notes as well. Now, there's one final story for everybody. Patrons get a couple of extra ones. Hold tight. They're coming up in a minute. This headline, though, this was actually posted in our Discord by a couple of people. And not really a headline that you see all that much in 2024, that a retro gaming video game ring worth $50 million or 50 million euros has been smashed in Italy. Now, reading this headline, it kind of reminded me of the days when you used to read about, you know, market traders who had like, you know, Amiga 600s out the back, copying games on Xcopy, then putting them out for the kids to buy, or having fake Mega Drive cartridges, that kind of thing. It kind of took me back to those days.
They were never worth 50 million.
Yeah, definitely not that kind of price. But this is interesting. So this made the headlines on the BBC, who I love it when traditional media try to report on things like gaming, because they put, you know, new versions of video games and gaming consoles that were released decades ago have recently soared in popularity and command high prices in a cultural trend known as, in quotes, retro gaming. So this story does sound quite interesting now. I mean, when you drill down into it, originally I was like, oh, really? The Italian police bothered about people, you know, copying Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo anymore. But it turns out these are actually clone consoles, aren't they?
Yeah.
So there are 12,000 consoles that they reckon hold over 47 million pirated retro games, including stuff like Mario Brothers, Street Fighter, Star Wars as well. Which the reason they've kind of got upset about this is not because they've pirated 30 or 40-year-old games. It's because these systems they're selling don't meet the safety standards that modern electronics need to be plugged into a household electrical ring.
This is your kind of AliExpress,
Yes.
kind of all-in-one console with 20,000 games, and you go on and they're all like really similar or just ROM dumps,
I've just done the maths. 3,916 games. If it is literally 12,000 consoles with 47 million games on them, that means these consoles boast 3,900 games. And as you've just said, Ravi, they're all very similar games.
Yeah. It's weird 'cause I actually, I got one of these suggested to me on Facebook as an advert the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And it said, contains, 37,000 retro games, something like that on there. I actually kind of trolled them a little bit because everyone was like tagging the mates now. I put, I assume all these are officially licensed. My comment got deleted in about 5 seconds. So there are a lot of them out there. They're generally made in China, aren't they? They're imported and sold, like you said, AliExpress, usual places too. But apparently a lot of these devices have got, non-certified batteries that often are rechargeable, that could set your house on fire, electrical circuits in there that don't meet EU technical or safety standards as well. So they've seized 12,000 of these consoles that they've destroyed. What's interesting is that it's kind of... it's took them this long to kind of do a crackdown on these. Because, God, I remember buying these things on, market stalls in Skegness 20 years ago, you know what I mean?
To a degree, like the multi-carts and stuff have actually helped like other systems like the Evercade get, into people's, adopting it,
People stop buying these, you mean, in other words?
Yeah, but also, years ago on those fairgrounds where you would get like multi-systems and stuff, has kind of opened people's eyes to that. But now there's a legitimate path. I see it a bit like, when Napster came out and then iTunes came later. It's like they've always been around, haven't they? These kind of piracy things. But now a lot of these games are actually legitimately put in collections. People are, actually selling them for money again. And that's when you're cutting into someone's profit. And yeah, now there's an official proper way of doing it and getting these kind of multi-systems and getting the official ROMs with stuff like the Atari collection. And it's interesting, but I do think, they were pretty cool devices years ago. And there might still be some pretty cool ones out there, but obviously they're a bit illegal.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's one thing a lot of people don't consider. We've all heard stories. We had where people in the retro communities have had house fires of dodgy lithium batteries being charged, and which makes me sometimes think. We were talking the other week, weren't we, Ravi? You mentioned about an iPod having a little kind of patch on its screen, and a little indentation.
The battery
on
bulging on iPod Nanos. Yeah,
I think they call them spicy pillows when these lithium batteries kind of inflate. And I remember, I think I had a device probably around 2007. It was actually a receipt scanner. And one day I noticed the case and it kind of popped open and the battery was kind of poking out of it. I didn't really know anything about it then. I was thinking, maybe I should just pop that with a pin or something. Whatever you do not do that, because they instantly ignite and can burn your house down.
Yeah, and
flames everywhere.
I think the kind of meeting European technical safety standards, that's cool, but that's also, the main reason is because they're pirating games that are out there and commercially available. Because,
do you think? I think it's the other way around. I don't think they really care about that. I think it's just literally because.
But I think there's so much stuff out there on like Temu and like these sites that aren't hitting European safety standards that are just coming through.
Exactly.
Like the e-cigarette stores. Like there's so much of that stuff out there at the moment that maybe they are doing a big crackdown on counterfeit goods and stuff. And that's probably a good thing if it's causing damage.
Yeah, we had those stories a few years ago about those kind of hoverboards, when people were plugging them in and leaving them charging overnight, they're getting house fires and
setting
stuff.
on fire in the street and some kids on it.
So it's always worth making sure that things do meet the standards. So, they've destroyed all of these counterfeit consoles now. So just something to bear in mind if you're ever thinking of buying one of these, or if that Facebook thread I saw the other day in that advert, people tagging all the friends and families in it. Just be aware that, these things can be a little bit
There's
dangerous.
a channel on YouTube called Big Clive. Check him out. He goes through these things and he checks the safety of them, and he'll do like adapters and stuff, and it is scary. Yeah, so there is some really dodgy stuff out there. Check out his channel; it's really good. Big Clive.
Right, then we are going to be talking to this week's special guest, Mark Cale from System 3, getting the story of Last Ninja. Games, of course, like Putty, going to be talking about that as well. Lots more coming up with him in just a moment. Before we do that, let's take a sec to give a massive thank you to our longest-running sponsor. We love Sam and the team at Bitmap Books, and you know that you and I are rather huge fans of the Amiga. And this is actually a book that you and I both had in our collection for many years. Commodore Amiga, a visual compendium. I believe you've actually got a copy at hand.
I have got a copy, and can you hear the sound of it? It's absolutely beautiful.
I can hear that quality coming through your microphone.
The thing that I love about this is it's not just the games of Amiga. I love the games of Amiga. There's some fantastic stuff that you recognise in there, but also there's a bit of coverage on the demo scene, on the pixel artwork of Jim Sachs as well. And I just loved all of that kind of stuff. It's a celebration of Amiga culture, but also 140 classic games as well. Beautifully presented. Some of the way that they've, scanned some of the art, they've got some maps that they've got of full levels that just look intricate and amazing, like cross sections of, those books you used to get when you were a kid. It's just a really nice way of exploring it. And I've got Amiga books. I've got lots of them. I absolutely love reading them. A lot of them, there's lots of text in them. They're pretty text heavy, but this is totally visual, and it's great to have a visual piece just to enjoy, and also have some great information on there as well.
Yeah, these books are real works of art, aren't they? Gorgeous. So if you love the Amiga, it kind of starts from, when the Amiga began, 1985, those early games, Marble Madness, Defender of the Crown, through to the games we all remember, your Cannon Fodder, Speedball, Worms, Populous, they're all in there as well. You've got quotes, commentary from renowned Amiga artists, developers and publishers, R.J. Michaels in the book, David Braben, Sid Meier, Ron Gilbert, Tobias Richard, Dave Gibbons, lots more as well. So if you love the Amiga, like you said, the games, the systems, the hardware, the demo scene, artists.
It's even got Putty Squad at the end, which, we're going to be talking to Mark about as well. So some great System 3 titles in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it ties in well with this week's interview. So if you love the Amiga, obviously the time of year when, if you've got a family, they're going to be asking soon, any ideas for Christmas? Which I can't believe I've just said the C word, but it's only a couple of months away now. This would be a really good stocking filler for you. Commodore Amiga, a visual compendium, or treat yourself and have a look at the rest of their retro gaming collection. And of course, support our sponsors. Really helps out the podcast as well. Head to the website, theretrohour.com. Right then. If you want more news, next Friday's podcast, we'll bring you up to speed on what's been happening over the next week. A little reminder as well, if you listen on a podcast app that can support reviews. I actually noticed on Spotify the other day, you can write reviews for individual episodes.
Oh my God, wow.
The podcast on there. So,
You've got 447 episodes to write.
We've got a bit of time this weekend. But anything we get on there, a good way to support the podcast. Any reviews, we'll get a little 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts. Nice little messages, not something I've had any for a couple of months, so they do really help us out there, guys. Always help us, push up the charts in that, mystical algorithm that no one really understands, helps get new listeners through the door. So we'd really appreciate that if you get a little bit of time over the weekend. And next, going inside the world of games like The Last Ninja and, of course, System 3 with our special guest, Mark Cale. Next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome on this week's very special guest. And it's someone who is behind one of the longest running, if not the longest running, British software houses and publishers. It is the founder and CEO of System 3, Mark Cale. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Good evening, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat to us this week. Interestingly, because System 3 was founded in 1982. Do you notice any kind of official stats if you are the longest running British software house? Because there can't be many older than 42 years.
Well, if you look back at that time, you had companies like Ocean Software You had Imagine that set up literally 6 months before us. Electronic Arts actually set up 6 months, I think, before us. We were October 82.
Yeah.
I think EA was around June 82. I mean, right at the very, very beginning. I don't think there is any other company I can really think of. The other big company, US Gold, was obviously part of Centresoft, set up by Jeff Brown and funded by my good friend, sadly no longer here with us, David Ward, who also owned Ocean. And they were obviously set up, sometime after, I think probably 84, 85, US Gold started getting into video games and licensing American games. So I really don't know any other companies that have been going as long as we have. I mean, I could be wrong. I think we probably are the longest running independent video games company in Europe, actually.
Yeah, that's an incredible achievement. And obviously still going strong today with a really exciting new project that we'll talk about for fans of Last Ninja. Something really cool that you're doing at the moment. And we'll get into that in a second. But obviously, I mean, it's always nice to find out a bit of background. So, I mean, talking about yourself personally, what kind of got you into video games? Do you remember where your journey began?
I remember it very well. It's a very good question, actually. So, at the age of 14, I spent a lot of time in the arcades. I was also playing on my Atari VCS at the time. I was also European Space Invaders champion. Later upgraded to 400, Atari 400, then Atari 800. And a lot of my focus at that time was on mainly American games. America had the best games on the Atari. Obviously, it was an Atari world out there and Commodore. But a lot of publishers were leaning towards Atari because of some of the really cool graphics features. They had this feature called the GTA chip here, Graphics 9 mode, with like sort of hues of color, which we used on Colony 7 as an example. So, that sort of got me inspired into the whole home computer thing. Now, at the time, I was actually working as a photographer's assistant in Covent Garden for a photographer called John Rawlins. And in the summer, I was second assistant to Norman Parkinson. John's former assistant was his full-time assistant. And Norman Parkinson came over in the summer. Had spent the whole of the winter out in the Caribbean. He had a sausage factory of all things.
Right.
I was always going on about video games and my passion and what I want to do with myself. And, John Rawlins said to me, that there isn't the money anymore in photography. If you really want to make it big in photography, you've got to look at something else. And he noticed my passion for video games and, sort of mentioned a few things. At the same time, I was doing some freelance photography work every now and then for Atari in the UK. I was formerly part of Ingersoll Electronics. I was doing the distribution first of all, and then became Atari. They were set up in Elperton, quite near where I lived. I lived in King Street at the time. And I was doing a lot of photography for these guys on their magazine called I.O., Input Output. And I would always talk about the games. I bought a lot of their great games. I was obsessed with video games and I'd critique them. And especially as I was also playing American games that started to come in, Synapse were brilliant. Broderbund were brilliant. Of course, Electronic Arts later came into play and they became a market leader. And you can't forget Activision, who were the first independent third-party software company in the world, a breakaway group from Atari. And with all of that background, you had a bit of training because you knew what a great game was. You knew what you expect. You saw things in the arcade. You could play games. And so what did I want as a consumer? And I'd critique these games. And a guy called John Norlidge said to me, worked for Atari, he said, if you feel this passionate about it, why don't you set up your own company? So I decided that's what I would do. I went home and I told my mum I was going to set up my own company and I quit my job, and she promptly kicked me out and I ended up in a bed and breakfast near Wembley Stadium. Quite close still to Atari, of course. But so System 3 actually started at that point, and it comes into where the name came from. So a lot of people say to me, well, where did you come up with the name System 3? Now, that was, again, another great question. That's because there were three of us. Before I actually decided to quit my job as a photographer's assistant, I discussed it with two other friends that were big into playing games. big into going to the arcades with me and playing computer games as you do as a young teenager. And we thought, well, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do this. And there were three of us. And the two friends were Emerson Best and Michael Koo. Michael Koo was doing a computer studies course at college called System Studies. And it just seemed obvious. System Studies became System 3. And that's how the name came about.
Well, what was the vision for the company at the start? And how did you kind of think of a long-lasting plan? And were there any gaps in the market that you found?
I think the vision for the company was always to try and make the perfect game, or the game that gave the best possible experience with the limitations we had at the time. Unfortunately, being young, I was quite arrogant and full of myself. I really believed we could be really good. You go and look at the old first international karate adverts. And, when you're making claims like perfection is the only accepted standard, we didn't know it was going to be such a big hit, but we started putting out statements like perfection is the only accepted standard. And what we saw as a vision was making great games. I must point out at this stage, Michael wasn't with us. He didn't actually set the company up with Emerson and I. He'd decided to stay at college. So there's only two of us. But we really sort of wanted to create great games. And a big influence was the home computer games that were coming from America. If you look at whether it's the Fort Apocalypse, if you look at Choplifter, you look at all of those great games. And even then, when EA started doing video games, you look at Archon or One on One, they were absolutely groundbreaking experiences. You had Miner 2049er, you had Jumpman, there's so many fantastic things. And of course, at the same time that we're trying to compete and look at this, there's all these leaked bits of software coming through from Lucasfilm. So you've got Rescue on Fractureless and Ball Blazer, and they wouldn't release it. And it took many years later until they actually released it. In fact, I was so impressed with American software at the time, it actually led me to the idea to go and start licensing games from American software companies. They were not represented in the UK or Europe. And we'd started to cut our teeth on our games, and we had distribution set up. It was all very ad hoc. It was probably the best way to describe it at the time. But we actually went out and licensed 3 American games on the Commodore. And I'm 18 years old.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Who goes to America at 18 with nothing, and you convince Americans to start licensing your games?
Did you think that?
To you, what was really interesting is I even met with people like Trip Hawkins at the time and many others. Started talking to everyone. I went from the East Coast right the way across to the West Coast. It was just an incredible experience. At the same time, we're looking to try and license our games out to America. And of course, they weren't to an American standard. Our first 3 games were not good enough, but I really knew what we needed to do. And we looked to try and find some great coders to achieve our vision of what we wanted. By which time, at this point, Emerson got a little bit frustrated with the industry and the lack of where we were going, and left circa 1985. And I kept my contacts up with the Americans. Like I said, we got these 3 licensed games in, which were Suicide Strike, Juice, and Motocross. They weren't bad games. They're okay. One was it does what it says on the tin. It was a motorbike motocross game. The other one was a sort of Qubit type rip-off called Juice. And the other one, Suicide Strike, was a sort of 3D shooter type thing. And so we bought in these games. We got the license, eventually picked everything up. And we started staying in touch with a lot of people. And at this time, I started going to the CES show. So the first time I went to the CES show was in Vegas in 1985. And it was there I met David Bishop and his partner. I think her name was Beth. And we were introduced to Andromeda. And this was going to be the solution to our problem, because we could find these programmers that not only had a large team, they're based in Hungary, but they had access to Atari STs that just were launching at that time. And so I got together with a gentleman called Robert Stein, who owned Andromeda, part owned Nova Trade, who was the controlling arm of all the studios in Hungary. And we set about doing our first contracts with them. International Karate, Bangkok Nights, and of course, Last Ninja.
It must have taken a lot to kind of go over to America. And I think, that confidence and bravado, what was your kind of driving force of going over and talking to, such greats in the video game world and convincing them to work with you?
It's a bit like the old analogy that if you're at a dance hall and you see a beautiful girl, there's one thing for sure. If you're going to go and ask her for a dance and she says no, then okay, you got your answer, right? But if you just sit there because you think she's going to say no, I tell you what, you're definitely not going to dance with her. So you've got to have that analogy in life. If you don't ask, you don't get. Yeah, people can always say no. You always try and be polite to people, but you've got to have that drive to pick up, go, and decide. This is what I think is right for me. This is where I want to be, and that gave me that drive to go. And to be fair, I mean, I think the Americans were, sort of taken aback by a young British lad that's come over there with all of these ideas. And because I did know so much about video games, and I could talk to their producers and a lot of their developers about it. You kind of fit it in. And the difference between British software guys and Americans is Americans were all about playability. British programmers were all about the technical aspect. How can we get things to work? How can we get things to run at a fast frame rate? What can we do to make this work? And you only have to look at, say, like Jez San and his SDK development system he had in later years. Yeah, his real success came when he partnered with Nintendo and developed the chip that was in Star Fox.
Super FX.
That was part of Star Glider, if you remember. Yes. So Star Fox was an evolution into Star Glider, or from Star Glider into Star Fox, and was a big sort of Nintendo game, in-house game. And it sort of made, that's what's something about innovations. And, the rest really, you can just say that people, I don't know. I think it was just the love of home computer games at the time. I mean, I used to be very much into what's happening in the American scene and know what people were doing. I'd buy an American magazine on import every month called Compute. And if you looked at CMVG, they were months and months behind the curve as to what was going on. They didn't get it.
Well, you mentioned about attending CES there in 1985, and that is kind of, one famous story that I've heard about System 3, the fact that obviously you were wanting to go there to promote international karate, but the game wasn't quite ready, so you had to do something else
let me put you into where we were. So I went to CES, we got going, we started looking at different developers and what we could do. We wanted to do the ST version of international karate with the Hungarians. The Commodore versions were licensed to a team in the UK called LT Software. I met the Hungarian boss of Andromeda, Robert Stein, who went on to become a partner of mine in later years and a very close friend. But what happened was that we started working with the Hungarians and we were working with a company called LT Software. Now, LT Software were based in Essex, and the Hungarians had no experience on Spectrum or Amstrad or those sort of things. And LT Software could deliver on Spectrum, Amstrad, supposedly Commodore 64. And there was a guy there, John Hare and Chris, his partner, that they went off to become Sensible Software, worked for the guys at LT Software, and they actually worked on our first Spectrum game, which was Twister. And that was the very first game these guys ever did together. But they also tried to do international karate in the Commodore 64, and Chris couldn't do it. There was a programmer there, I can't remember his name. He managed to get a Spectrum version of international karate done, which came out in late 85. But, and the graphics were done by John Hare, but the original C64 graphics were penned out by John and then handed later on to Archer. So what happened was, the Hungarians were working on Last Ninja, ST version of International Karate, and Bangkok Nights. It was a complete nightmare. LT Software did not deliver what we wanted. And at this stage, I've started to become quite successful, not big, but doing okay. And after my mum had thrown me out, she felt rather foolish because she thought nothing would come of this vision I had. And so to expand further and really get myself going and to be established on a global stage, it was in September 1985 that we booked a stand at the PCW show in Olympia. And my mum had mortgaged her house to lend me at that time. I think it was about 45 or 50,000 pounds she lent me, which is an incredible amount of money in today's standard. But she gambled everything again on my success. And without my mum doing that, the rest wouldn't happen. So now you've got a problem. You mentioned the show. What happened with the show? It wasn't CES. It was the PCW show. But what happened was we had no software. There was nothing to show. LT Software had let us down. And so we needed a solution. And, the thought came to me, it's like, okay, well, we've got to be a bit brash. We need to get distribution. Let's just have demo videos of screenshots going up and videos playing on monitors. Let's build a stand that is 2 hexagonals put together. The one at the front, we're going to build a stage. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to put on a live karate demonstration, which we did. And the whole idea was these guys that we found in Chinatown in London through an agent, and they were absolutely brilliant because they would put broken glass, smash broken glass on the floor. They'd lie on it. They'd then put breeze blocks on their chests, and another guy would smash the breeze blocks with a sledgehammer. They'd walk together with an iron bar in between their throats and bend it, and they'll get people to try and bend it beforehand. These guys are incredible, putting a great show. But one thing I did know is you got to be noticed. It's about marketing. And today you would just not be able to get away with what we did at the time. And I decided that I needed to find an angle, a hook. How do I get the national press to cover this and to be controversial? And we had this game that Chris and John had finished earlier called Twister that was all but finished. And so we decided to change its name from Twister to Twister Mother of Harlots, and we put on a show of what best could be described as 3 girls in lesbotics kind of actions. Fully dressed, there was nothing wrong, but we knew the show organisers were hardcore Christians. They would be outraged. And of course, the first day we're there, the whole show comes to a standstill. People are clamouring to look at our stand. We have a show on every 2 hours. People stop everything, cancel meetings to come and look at these. So it was a marketing exercise. You've got nothing, you're selling vaporware, right? You've got a vision, you've got a game that's all but finished, but your main game, karate, isn't done, right? So you've got to be ballsy. I'm not sure I'd do that now and risk my mum's house, but it was brilliant. Now, one of the publishers at the show was Activision, and they're just releasing Ghostbusters.
Yes.
And they wanted European partners to help set up their UK operation. And of course, they noticed this whole commotion and what we were doing. But better than that, the end of the first day, the show organisers came up to me and said, right, that's disgusting. You can't have that. What do you mean? They're fully clothed. They're not even like scantily clothed in they're fully covered, right? They're in leather outfits. They've got gothic makeup on. Oh, okay, they've got whips and chains and stuff, but, well, we don't like their dance actions. Well, I didn't know there's any rules here that we can't have certain dance. Look at your rules here. I don't care. That can't happen tomorrow. If you put those girls on the stage tomorrow, we're going to shut you down. We're going to switch off the electricity.
Wow.
Oh, brilliant. Straight on the phone to all Fleet Street. Fleet Street's there in the morning. Sure enough, show starts. Bang. Electric's cut to the stand, right? Now you're in the national press. You've got Activision there. They start talking to us. They do a deal with us. Now I've got my funding. I've hit my target, right? I've got my outlet. I've achieved what I wanted to do. We've now got a partner, an international partner. And, one could argue at that time was the biggest software publisher in the world in terms 100%. Of turnover, etc. And don't forget, David Crane and all those guys, whether it's your Pitfall, all those things they've done on the VCS, all these guys came across. They had little computer people, he had everything else that was coming through with Activision, where he had was Ghostbusters and what have you. And the deal I had with Activision, you just couldn't do that today. It was a dream come true. I can't believe a young guy I managed to do this, but I convinced these guys in America, and the guy running International was a guy called Greg Fishback that went on to set up Acclaim and became the president of Acclaim. And it's another guy that was there, a guy called Rod Cousins, that was then running Electric Dreams. And I got on very well with all of these guys, and we've done the deal. But Greg was from the record industry. And so once you knew he's from the record industry and had friends in the record industry, you knew about co-publishing. I wasn't giving you my rights. I'm giving you a distribution opportunity. And the deal I negotiated with Activision was that not only would they give us a minimum guarantee, here's a lineup for our next 7 titles, sight unseen, a bit like how you do with a band, you just want to lock down that creative talent. They loved the idea of my marketing and what I did. They thought it was very ballsy. They loved that. They loved the vision I had for international karate. And so we signed up this deal. And the deal was amazing because not only did they give us a guarantee per title, per unit, what do you think they would take for that as a funding and doing everything? 15%.
Yeah.
15%. Wow. So I got, in terms of net receipts, 85%. I chose my own marketing campaign, my own advertising, which is why I could then go and advertise karate and Last Ninja and everything else and do what I wanted to do with the freedom of knowing that Activision's paying for as part of this deal. And my costs in terms of development are being covered with these advances. So I only have to focus on doing these great games. Now, it got even better than that. So now we're tied in with Activision. Mm-hmm. They launched Twister, I think it was around April 86. Or February 86 on Spectrum. Didn't really do anything. And we were just finishing International Karate on the C64. The Spectrum version had come out that Christmas. It wasn't the best version. We'll come on to that in a second. It wasn't very good, I don't think. I didn't actually want to put it on this Last Ninja collection, but a lot of people said we should put it on there, even if it is bad.
Yeah.
We don't really want to, but we have to. But anyway, with that relationship with Activision, I got on really well with a guy called Andy Wright, who was doing their marketing and mainly their PR. He was very close with the Newsfield guys, and in particular, Gary Penn, Julian Rigg, all those sort of guys. And they heard of this guy called Archer McLean, and they recommended that I get Archer on board. They also recommended that I get John Twiddy on board. We'll come on to that with The Last Ninja and what happened with Andromeda. Mm-hmm. But effectively, we contacted Archer. He'd done Drop Zone. He loved the idea of international karate, and we got him on board. And we took him out to Hungary. We showed them what they were doing on the Atari ST. And don't forget, the Atari ST version, we always wanted to have a sequel where there was 3 players. So there's actually a cheat key in the original International Karate on the Atari ST that gives you 3 players. A lot of people don't know that, but there is. But ultimately, Archer was going out there and meeting with the Hungarians. I was taking Bob Stevenson out there, who's very, very big artist in the day. And the rest of the day was history. We created International Karate. We turned it around quite quickly. Archer finished the game around April 1986. And part of our deal with Activision was they had first right of refusal. What that means is they got distribution rights, and the advances are just for Europe and for Australia. Mm. If I wanted to go to Asia, I wanted to go to America, they'd have to pay more money. But they had first and last rights of refusal. So we sent a copy of International Karate and the Commodore 64 and the Atari 400, 800. And it was given to a guy there. He's a lovely guy. We laugh about it now. A guy called Scott Orr. Now, Scott Orr had just been bought. He had a sports company that had just been bought by Activision. I think it was called GameStar. And they wanted to compete in the American football market. And GameStar were doing American football games, which they wanted to do. So Scott Orr was now setting up their sports division in America. International Karate was part of, or would have been part of, their vision was, okay, it fits into sport. I still have the facts today from Scott where he advised Activision not to take it on. Quote, "This is typical European crap. It will never work in America. It's absolute rubbish. There's no strategy. It's too arcadey. Will be a failure. We won't sign it. We shouldn't pass it. I don't want it under GameStar. I don't want it with Activision. Pass on it."
Oh, wow.
So they come back and go, "Sorry, this game's not good enough. We're going to pass on it. And based on what happened with the Spectrum version, we have to agree. We're going to pass." Okay. But in my travels, I met a guy called Cliff Crowder. Cliff Crowder was a former sales manager at Activision in the States. He'd become an agent. And I was very close with him, and I asked him, well, look, they don't want it. And I met him at CES in 85. So we'd already had this relationship from David Bishop. They introduced me to him, who's been a great help to me. And Cliff then said, I'll go and represent it to you with a number of other software publishers. So we created copies. He sent out copies to Broadband, EA, Epix, various other people in the States. Epix were big in sports titles. They had the Summer Games, Winter Games series.
Yeah.
And their president, Gil Freeman, got in touch with Cliff and said, look, I want to come and see this guy. And within 48 hours of them receiving the disc in America, it was in my office in London, and we signed the deal. They rushed it through. They put it through so it was on show. Don't forget, this is April. So by June, it had already been submitted to the various software innovation awards and things like that at CES. And it was launched at CES on the Epic stand.
That's an
and it
incredible
got a
turnaround,
CES showcase. It got a CES showcase award for technical achievement. Yeah, months ago you got this other guy, Score, saying it's typical, European crap. Right? This is not going to work. Okay, so they release it. It goes on to become the first Billboard #1 from a European company on the Commodore 64. I don't know if anyone done that on the VIC-20. Some people say Jeff Minter did. I don't know. So all I can say is it was the first company. I think we are the first company to get a Billboard #1 in the States, but definitely we're the first company to get a Billboard #1 in the States on the Commodore 64.
Yeah, I heard it sold 1.5 million copies, which is nuts.
I know, it's absolutely incredible. Yeah. And I got very close with Epix, and so we started working on their sports titles. Now you've got Activision really miffed. Bruce Davis came in to take over from Levy that had been got rid of as the president, and he changed the name to Mediagenic, but he really befriended me and wanted me to be part of Activision and that whole journey. And so whatever I want, I mean, it was great days. We could do whatever we want. So at that particular point, so you think about this, within a year in 1987, we've launched Last Ninja, and that goes on to become a huge hit everywhere. #1 everywhere. But not only that, we also launched the sequel, IK Plus. And IK Plus on the Commodore again goes on to huge acclaim, and it became chop and drop in America. Again, I don't understand why the Americans want to keep retitling things. They don't like International Karate or IK Plus. Why? I don't know. But, you had World Championship Karate from Epix and chop and drop from Activision. I don't know. Right? I don't know.
It was a common thing back then, though, wasn't it? Yeah, they did it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they always felt they knew best about marketing and things like that, which probably they did. They were a lot better than the Europeans on most things in terms of marketing. You only have to look at how they put on the Olympic Games in the 80s compared to anyone else. It was a spectacle. So there's always razzmatazz with Americans, and I love all that about America. I love their marketing. I like the way they got that get up and go, that passion, that drive that I think is lacking with a lot of us British and European people. We don't seem to, we're a bit more reserved. I think that's the best way to say we're a bit more reserved. But, at that point, And again, you can go and speak with former employees like Rod Cousins and that. But you think about 1988, Last Ninja 2 came out, IK Plus was out on the Amiga. Do you know, globally at that point, we were at almost 75% of Activision's global revenue.
Yeah, that's insane.
So from a little guy that was nothing 2 or 3 years ago, there was the right synergy for everything to happen. Because a lot of the stuff they had in America, like Little Computer People or, Infocom with their Liver Goddess of Phobos and all the other stuff, it didn't really work in the same way over here. Or Hacker and all these other things, because they were too simmy. They had that Scott Orr attitude of it's got to be a sim. Now, it might have worked very well in Germany, I'm sure it did, right? But for the most part, the French, the British, the Italians and that were far more into an arcadey gaming experience. And America, for the most part, had always had great games. Look at, till I said, Broderbund, Cyrus, Synapse. Synapse always one of my favourite companies. EA. All of these guys made fantastic games. And I used to love, the Atari machine and the Commodore machine and what it could do. Even down to when I was doing International Karate, I was doing the tour of what we want to do with Last Ninja. I went to see Pat at Datasoft because they'd done Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee was a big inspiration for me for the Last Ninja series. But as a platform game, I wanted a 3D game. But it was a big inspiration. And so you're meeting all these people and things. It was a great time. It was a great time. We started winning awards, CMVG awards, either runner-up or best game or best sound or whatever. And it was, so Golden Joystick Awards started to come in and things like that, or runner-up awards for Game of the Year or whatever. The industry, we had the Indian, we had another industry event every year that everyone went to. There was, I can't remember what it's called now. Computer Arena.
I've heard those Indians were quite legendary. I've heard some stories.
Oh, yeah, but we'd win all the awards. We'd win all the awards. Best 8-bit, best this, best sound. Still got everything. It was fantastic. And, it's at that time I got quite close with David Ward of Ocean. We always started to get close. We had a lot of similar passions in line with each other. He was a bit older than me. As I said earlier, sadly, he's not with us anymore, but he was a lovely, lovely guy. But they were into licensing. They understood the same as me about, what's the hook? What's this? What's that? And they'd done amazing things, and through David, I met David Pleasance at Commodore. Mm-hmm. And so then we started getting bundles with Commodores. And so everything kept rolling and rolling and rolling and going better and better and better. It was a fantastic time, that period. It really was a great time to be in the games industry and completely different to what it is today. Today's very expensive, but I would say stale, and, everyone, no one only wants to take something if, what other games like that have made a hit. You don't have buyers that do what they're supposed to do. In fact, you don't have buyers anymore because everything's digital.
Yeah. Or digital storefronts, yeah.
And this goes on to why we done the Last Ninja collection as a collector's piece on Kickstarter, because you would not be able to sell this in store.
Well, I'm quite curious to get into the story of Last Ninja a bit more. So obviously we'll get into the Kickstarter that you're running at the moment, which is running right now when this podcast comes out. And it sounds really interesting, actually. But kind of taking it back a few steps, you mentioned about working with Andromeda, who were based in Hungary. And obviously they played a crucial role in the development of Last Ninja. And first of all, I'm interested in kind of the tools they developed to solve the problems and the technical limitations of the Commodore 64, but also how was it collaborating with a team based across the continent in that time period? Because obviously there was no internet then. How did it kind of work and what was their input like?
Well, first of all, what a great adventure in life that was for a young lad. You're going, you're crossing the Iron Curtain and you're working with people that don't speak very good English. You're relying on this guy, Robert Stein. But it was a fantastic experience. Mm. So because they were shielded from the rest of the world, I think they looked at things outside the box. In fact, a lot of technology was banned from going into Hungary, and they had to find special ways to get import licenses to get Commodores or Atari STs into Hungary because of the technology ban between Russia and America and things like that. So there's a lot of hoops Robert Stein had to get over to make that happen. But once he did, like I said, these guys were fantastic in that they were technical. They were like British programmers on steroids because they were not restricted by, oh, this game, how did they do that? Let's do something like that, or let's do this. So with The Last Ninja, the whole concept I had would be high-res art. I wanted an adventure. I wanted an adventure that I don't type text in. I wanted an adventure that I, don't want anything to interrupt a flow of gameplay. I wanted a game whereby I could go around with a character in a beautiful, sort of art environment, great soundtrack, and find and pick up things and solve puzzles, as well as having some sort of limited fight or ability or whatever. But it's telling a story in a more interactive way. And those sort of things were just unheard of at that time. So if you look at whether it's The Hobbit from Melbourne House, you look at all the Adventure International, Text Adventures, Rainbow Arts over here in Europe, Infocom I mentioned earlier, Activision bought them because it's such a big deal in America. But I didn't want to sit there and type in responses and have a response one way or another. To me, that was worse than, oh Christ, what's the name of that arcade game where it had a laser disc in Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's Lair,
yeah. Where because I'm just like, well, this is it. What? It's all about timing as to whether you're going to play a cartoon strip of this or that.
Beautiful looking game, but frustrating as hell,
yeah, because it's just about Twitch response, right? It's cheating. It's an interactive cartoon.
And I was wondering as well if you could let our listeners know who Robert Stein was, as they might not know.
So Robert Stein is legendary. Robert Stein found Tetris. The Russians sent through to Nova Trade Tetris. Robert picked it up. He showed it to a number of people. They said, this is fantastic. He got Microsoft interested. They're going to do the deal. The deal was all agreed. The Russians were in the Nova Trade offices in Budapest. And unbeknownst to Robert and also Microsoft, I was actually there at the time as Peter Bellotta and I think one of the, I'm not sure it was Kevin Maxwell or one of Robert Maxwell's sons was out there trying to close the deal. And in the other room, unbeknownst to us, was this guy called Hank Rogers. Now, Hank Rogers had already convinced Nintendo this was going to be the game that's going to launch the Game Boy handheld. We had been working previously with Epix, and we knew of their link system. And so at this stage, when Tetris was coming around, Nintendo needed something, a real playable hook to sell a black and white machine. You had a color handheld called Lynx, or you got this horrible black and white looking Game Boy thing from Nintendo. But the Game Boy was so much more playable with Tetris and the many other games that Nintendo produced on it. It didn't matter it was black and white. You just got over it. And the rest, as I say, was history because it killed the Lynx. But what had happened is, to get this away, Hank Rogers dealt with the Russians directly behind the back of Robert. So at the end of the day, both Robert Stein made nothing out of it, didn't get anything out of it, and Microsoft lost it as well. And of course, there was and is now on streaming channels the movie called Tetris, where Robert Stein is one of the key stars actually in there. His character is sadly Robert's passed away as well. But Robert was such a really strong, influential figure in my life, and in certain areas, came in and became a partner, and really done a lot of great things for my business in later years. And is sadly missed. But he's a really important part of the video games industry that not a lot of people really talk about. And it's this whole, a deal was done, a heads of agreement was done with the Russians and with Microsoft. And Hank Rogers came in and stole it. He went straight to Russia and got the deal done directly there.
Well, tell us about this project that you've got running right now then? Because obviously The Last Ninja, legendary title, and yet another game that really put System 3 on the map, and obviously had several sequels after that as well. But jumping forward to the current time, you've actually got a Kickstarter that's running right now that's been extremely successful. I see that you're 8 times over your goal at the time of recording this. There's still a couple of weeks left on it, called The Last Ninja Collection. So tell us what the concept is behind this, and why was now the right time to do it?
Well, I think at the moment there's a big movement for recreating old retro games, but creating them as they were, not in terms of updating them, but actually people want to collect games as they are. And also, did you know that most games before 2010 are going to be lost forever in time? And why is that? It's because hardware systems are changing, formats are changing, and these things are not preserved. If something's on a cartridge or something's on a disc or something, not a floppy, but a Blu-ray disc or whatever, it's got a better chance of game preservation. And what I noticed was when we started selling a lot of our old PlayStation games, like PlayStation 1 games on the PlayStation 3, on the PlayStation Store, all of a sudden they shut down the PlayStation 3 store. All the stuff that you've got, if you want to go put it onto another PlayStation 3 or what have you, you just simply couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And you just can't access those games anymore. And that's really sad. And there's a lot of games being lost. So the first thing why we did this was because of video game preservation, which I think is very important, that a lot of these classic games, not just our games, but other people's games as well, should actually be preserved in some way, because there's a whole history of how games developed. But secondly, so many people keep saying to us, look, release Last Ninja, release Last Ninja 4, release the old series. And the eyes, for some reason, seem to be very iconic artwork in the video games industry. Everybody seems to know the Last Ninja eyes. And there was just this calling to create a retro collection of our old Last Ninja games. You thought, okay, well, we'll do this, but how do you sell a limited run type game? First of all, we spoke to Limited Run and we're in discussions with them a couple of years ago about doing this. And, we never could conclude a deal with them. Martin, they're still very big supporter of Last Ninja and pushed us to do this and was probably responsible for me doing this. But the whole Embracer group went in a different direction. They'd bought Limited Run games and they were going in a different direction in terms of where they want to focus their priorities on. So we thought, okay, well, we'll do this ourselves. We're going to do this ourselves. The next problem you've got is, how do I sell this when most of the GameStop stores across Europe are shutting down? And a lot of the game stores in the UK have shut down, or they're part of Sports Direct now. And actually, if you go in these stores, they're selling toys and plush and controllers. It's not really about video games. Now, certainly there isn't Game of the Year editions anymore or collectible items like there used to be. And so your big dilemma is, well, I don't want to really sell this digitally, although I can, but how do I create like a Nintendo Switch cartridge, which was our initial focus? I want this to go on Switch. I know that it can be preserved a lot better on a Switch cartridge, and this is what we want to do. Okay, but then other people would want it on PC. Then when we launched it, we had people bitching and moaning and say, well, why is it not on PlayStation and Xbox? So we had to then start converting. The game's all but done now on Nintendo Switch. We're just before alpha, and one of the things that we said to everyone that's backs us, it doesn't matter what tier you have. There are a number of tiers from bronze to diamond. Whatever tier you back, your name goes in the credits to help make this video preservation happen. It's really important.
You're immortalized in the game history.
Correct. But it's not in the actual Last Ninja 1 or Last Ninja 2. It's in the credits of the compilation of the Last Ninja collection. Yeah. And what we said is, right, we're not going to ever do a Last Ninja collection again, right? Whilst these games may appear, like records may appear or singles may appear as compilations or whatever, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, okay? But what I can say is we'll never, ever do the Last Ninja collection plus bonus games again. So one-off chance. We selected the Amiga, the Spectrum and Commodore 64 because they are the popular machines that really made the company. And we thought, well, this is the way to do it. We're going to go on Kickstarter and use that effectively as an online store to get physical copies to people. And actually, if you look at how many physical copies we sold versus a digital offering, it's night and day. So people are really into it. Now, what we also wanted to do was explain why there's not been a Last Ninja 4. People probably thought we weren't telling the truth. That we failed many times in doing Last Ninja 4 for a variety of reasons. I mean, I can go back all the way to the 90s where we had a deal with Philips Interactive. They pulled out of the industry and paid us a settlement fee to walk away. We looked at carrying on. We then done a deal with EA. That had a lot of controversy about it. EA wanted it, but a certain company they had to get approval from that you'd have to manufacture through. I will say no more, but they said no. We're not giving this title concept approval. And so, although EA, and they say it's one of the best things they've ever seen, it's the first time in their history that this manufacturer decided it's not going onto our format. And said, we can't do it then. We've got to pull out. Then after that, this person left the said company, and it did get approval, and we then got it picked up by Simon & Schuster Interactive. Simon & Schuster then left the industry, and so this is where we were around 2002, 2004. So we're going to give, as part of the top tier, a work in progress demo of that, all of the graphics. There's over 32 rough levels that we'd created, storyboards, everything in there. Then we decided to start it again around 2017, 2016, and we had a great playable demo come 2018, which is what you can see on that video there. So we looked at other ways you can innovate. Now, one of the problems we've always had is, Last Ninja needs to be this full interactive adventure, but you now need to be third person or first person. And the idea of isometric up until this point was dead. People wanted that full immersive play as if it's a full 3D game. The trouble is, you can't easily do that if you're a small publisher. Now, you look at Sega's recent release, Astrobot, right? When someone's spending $250 million on a game, where do we figure in that? It's very difficult to compete. So all you can, but at the end of the day, I think you can make a great game for $5 million or whatever, but it's a far cry to what we used to spend on development. And so, I made the very, very difficult decision just before COVID to call a day on The Last Ninja, because I just felt, it's a great game. And there's a lot of innovation we've done in there. You can see that. I mean, some of the things we've done was the first ever time that there's footprints in the snow. I know Sony loved it. A lot of people really loved it. But the games industry was going through a difficult phase. It was waiting for PlayStation 5 to come. And we are at that transition point of you're at the end of PS4. It's a very depressed market. It's very difficult to get people to commit to that, especially as retail had now started to die and digital had taken over. And lo and behold, obviously, shortly after that, you had COVID that hit the UK in March 2020. The whole country shuts down. Everyone's buying digital now. Everyone's playing video games. And, the retailer, that's the nail in the coffin for video games retailers. And that was it. So now you can't go. So how we used to do things with Activision or whatever, and go, here's a game. What do you think you can sell? And you get commitments in distribution through physical sales. That whole world is over. It doesn't work anymore. The problem with digital, you could have the best story, the best game that no one ever knows about. Why is that? Well, you're beholden to influencers. If they want to cover your game, even if they like it, how much you're going to pay me, right? There's very few magazines now at all. In fact, the only magazine that does well is Retro Gamer. If you look at official PlayStation, it's a far cry of its former self. I don't even know if it's still going. But, ultimately, the industry's moved on and you can't do that. And if you suddenly want to play in the world of multi millions into a game, and now you're beholden on a format platform holder that's going to put it on their store, you can't sell it on your own store, you've got no control. That's a huge risk for you.
Yeah, of course.
And so what our focus has been is to innovate in other areas, which is why we invented for Nintendo Code in the Box. We done first Code in the Box, actually, with our Ferrari game on PlayStation 3. The giants all got together and lobbied Sony to make sure that never happened again. They've never done Code in the Box since. Many people on our Kickstarter say, why can't you give me a digital Code in the Box on PlayStation? Sadly, Sony still don't allow that. We can't just give you a code like that. We can buy loads of codes cash up front and buy thousands of them of Sony. Whether they sell or not is irrelevant. You've got to pay them a lot of money, and they still want their percentage, which I can't reveal because obviously I've got a publishing contract with Sony. But, Sony wants a certain amount of money. They want their skin in the game all the time. Then the other difficult side you've got when you look at Microsoft in terms of the physical world is they decide to stop making discs. They don't want discs. And why is that? Have your listeners thought about why Microsoft is stopping discs? I'll tell you why. There's 3 reasons. 1, they want to get people out of the habit of buying games. 2, they're pushing Game Pass and they're trying to get it on everyone's format. And 3, that's their largest sector of their business that makes them more money than any other division within Microsoft. So their vision is to wipe out physical sales and become the world-leading streaming service. That should worry everyone.
It don't be like the Netflix of video games, pretty much.
That's what they are aiming to be. I am very good friends with one of the third-party managers of Microsoft that's no longer there, a guy called Mark Cale. We used to go to football with him every week. Every time our team played at home, we'd go to football with him. Microsoft had a box at this particular football club, and we'd always meet up, and I had my own tickets and what have you. And I had another mutual friend from another company, another publisher. We'd all go there, we'd go drinking or meet up afterwards or what have you after the game and, whatever. But I told him at the time, this is terrible for everybody because what happens is once Microsoft has got this strange stronghold on everyone, they're then saying your game's not well. I don't care what you paid for it. We're only going to give you X amount of money, which won't cover it. And by the way, now that they've got their streaming taken over, who's going to buy a digital game on their system? Which is why they stopped manufacturing physical discs. And one of the problems we clearly pointed out to our backers is at the moment it's only can be digital on Xbox. We're trying to convince Microsoft in terms of video game preservation to allow us to press discs for this. We make it very, very clear. We don't have that problem with Sony, don't have that problem with Nintendo, but with Microsoft, no, we don't want discs. Okay. I think that's really bad for video game preservation.
Oh, 100%.
I think it's really bad for the market. I think it's really bad for users that they don't have something physical they could then sell. So effectively, when someone's buying a video game, they're just buying a license to use it for a period of time. They don't own it. It's not collectible. And that's what's inspired us really to make this a great collectible collector's edition. But we're putting the history of all of Last Ninja on that diamond pack. So copies of the Electronic Arts contract, the Activision contract I spoke about, Philips Interactive, Simon & Schuster, all of those contracts are going to be in there. Correspondence with first-party hardware people that turned down Last Ninja 4 to EA and their response. All of that will be revealed. Redacted, so, people names are not put out there, but this will be facts so people can see the whole full story of why Last Ninja 4 had been stymied by a particular platform holder early on when they were very dominant in the States.
I also heard that John Twitty's got several old discs in his collection that you're hoping to make available to fans as well.
Well, that's going to be part of it as well. We've got the very first Last Ninja mastering discs right the way up to Last Ninja 3 and Last Ninja Remix. We've got the original Ben Dalglish discs.
Wow.
At last, the last Ninja, because I kept pushing and as we said earlier, a mutual friend of ours, I drive him mad because I keep changing things all the time because I just want things right. I want things how I see and feel them and how I hear them. And people, details matter to me. I'm a bit weird like that. Ultimately, this collection is really about trying to give the fans access to a piece of history. That's it. Once it's done, it's done. It's there. It's preserved, but we're not going to recreate it again.
I'm interested as well about...
Might create it on Switch too. I don't know. I don't think there's going to be much difference. I might create it on whatever might be, the next console or whatever. But it will never. It will always be a limited run of just 7,500 units ever.
Well, I think it is incredible that you have managed to pull this together. Of course, I mean, for anyone that was a fan of those games, like you said, this is really like the ultimate preservation of it, and the fact that it was fully funded in 37 minutes when you launched it on Kickstarter. They actually approved it as a project that we love. The Kickstarter stamp on there as well. So it really proves that there is a lot of demand for it as well. And obviously I'll link it up in the show notes. There is still about a week left when this episode comes out, so I'd say get in there now. Like you said, Mark, it's kind of now or never, isn't it? In terms of other System 3 IPs, I mean, any plans to do anything else like this? I mean, you mentioned games like Myth, that was a massive fan of, and obviously the Putty games on the Amiga, and we had the Amiga release of Putty Squad a couple of years ago. I mean, any plans to do any more kind of collections and preservations?
Well, I think the Amiga games several years back, I think it was Galahad that approached us to help us and wanted to pull those discs out. And John had his old files like he does for all the Ninja stuff. Yeah. And basically the whole idea with that was, well, look, we're never going to release this ever. People didn't believe when we were getting those high scores in magazines. People thought it was just lying or paying off reviewers and it was never finished. Well, of course it was finished. It was a great game. It was finished. What people didn't understand is retail had moved on. You could not put Amiga games into retail. So why am I going to do a run of Amiga games that I'm not going to sell? So in other words, you couldn't release it. We decided, well, got to write it off. It's abandoned. And because it was abandoned and we were approached by the community to actually release it, that's what we did. We gave it away for video game preservation I think it was Christmas 10 years ago, 2014, right? So, and I spoke to Sam, who's of Bitmap Books. I even gave him permission at certain levels that a copy of the game on floppy can be given away to help him as well. I always try and help people. And I think video game preservation is really, really important and is underestimated at the moment. It's something I think BAFTA and a few other bodies are looking at the moment, which is important. But it's to try and get everything together and preserve everything together. There's so many great games, great products that people should remember and see how this whole evolution has come about. But getting back to our Myth, of course we'd love to do a Myth. But at the moment we're focused on Last Ninja. With Myth, for example, the Spectrum version, I absolutely loved. It was brilliant. It was my favourite version on Spectrum. So, certain games we'd love to do. Some preservation. And we've got an announcement we're making in a few weeks' time of another game that we're releasing that we own the rights to, but it's a very, very famous old shoot 'em up that a good friend of mine created 40 years ago. But we're actually going to be doing an announcement for that. But that's actually finished, approved by Sony and Nintendo, and it's on PC and everything. Still waiting for Microsoft, as always. They're holding us up. But yes, this will be another massive old retro classic that needs to be preserved and is part of that whole history of retro games and shooters and things like that, sure. Which we are giving out and selling through various channels from, I believe it's from the end of October. Like I said, we're going to be announcing it just after our Kickstarter finishes. And the plan is to make that go live shortly after. In terms of other games, well, we are looking to get the original Putty up there because I thought that was very unique. You can get the original Constructor still on Steam as well as Mob Rule. I think that's quite unique with British humour. Obviously a lot of people have got a love for the Constructor series. Other games that are big, as a lot of people talk about, what about some of your other IPs, be it Turbocharged, Vendetta, Tusker, some people love. I never liked Tusker. I think that didn't fulfill what I wanted it to see.
Right.
Dominator, things like that. So there is talk about putting all these things together. And we also own the James Pond rights and we will be putting together a collection of all of the James Pond games. James Pond 1, 2, and 3, and then aquatic games will be something we'll put together for video game preservation. That's an exclusive we're telling you now, but it'll be something we will announce in due course. And again, I think trying to strive to create collections of great IPs for video game preservation is an important part of our job before we all leave this world or retire or whatever. We're getting a lot older now. But yeah, I mean, so of course, a lot of our old games will go on there. Things with licenses, it's a little bit more difficult. So for example, things like Ferrari Challenge and things like that, you're restricted by licenses. That's why we like creating our own IP. So we've got full control. But for the most part, I think the idea of getting a lot of our IP out there is on the plan.
James Pond would definitely be huge as well. That's great news.
Well, the Super Nintendo and Mega Drive version, especially in America, I mean, if you look at a lot of people, they always put James Pond in one of their top 10 Mega Drive games.
Yeah, I had it on the Amiga back in the day. It was one of my favourite on that.
I liked it on the Amiga, but I thought on the Mega Drive it was just absolutely awesome. And it's not Robocod, James Pond Operation Robocod, which I thought was the best one. I think it's actually Starfish with the last one. I thought was really good, but the trouble is it was late at the time, and I just don't think he got the right push from EA at that time. We didn't create James Pond. It was a separate company, Millennium, that created it. That was then sold to Sony. They shut it down, and then a partner of mine and myself, we picked up the rights to James Bond, and that's how we got the line of rights in terms of that IP.
Well, Mark, it's incredible to hear, how much you're doing for game preservation, which I think, as you mentioned, is such an important thing to do. And the reason that we do this podcast as well, to preserve the stories. So I think it's all really important that the industry is preserved in all the many ways. And obviously, not that you need good luck with the Kickstarter because you're already absolutely smashing it on there. But if people want to back it, it is still running till Thursday, October the 10th. But I'd implore people to get in there and back it ASAP. So I'll link it up in the show notes so people can click through. And best of luck with it, Mark. And we look forward to hearing that shoot 'em up announcement as well. That sounds quite interesting.
Well, maybe we can get together and do a little short podcast in 3 or 4 weeks' time.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like a plan, Mark. Let's do that.
Okay, well, Thank you very much, guys. Have a great evening. I appreciate all of your help.